Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Iowa's Broadband Grant Program. My name is Chris Salemi, and I am the Government Affairs Liaison for Airspan Networks. I'm here in DC. I'm going to be starting today by walking you through and highlighting the program's requirements and benchmarks, as well as then handing the reins over to my colleague, Jamie Fink, Vice President of Technology, to discuss our solutions and technology. Once Jamie has walked through his slides, as Ashley pointed out, we will then open it up for some Q&A. So let's start. Let's start here with the program history. On October 11th, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds authorized the allocation of $200 million in the American Rescue Plan State Local Recovery Funds to the Empower Rural Broadband Iowa Grant Program. The program awards grants to service providers to install broadband infrastructure in unserved and underserved areas throughout Iowa. What does this look like exactly? Well, this is the third and largest installment of funding offered through the program during 2001. In 2020, roughly $60 million was distributed through this program using a combination of state funds and coronavirus relief funds. So let's now dive a little deeper into the specific program itself that we're talking about today. So the program description, this NOFA will award up to $200 million, as stated earlier, to service providers for projects that facilitate broadband service speeds at 100 down, 100 up, or 100 down, 20 up to eligible service areas defined as census blocks where no provider offers wireline service at speeds greater than or equal to 25.3, the FCC's minimum broadband service standard speed. Moving along now to resources, our last bullet point on this slide. While we have provided a number of documents and resources for this webinar, I would also, though, invite you to visit the Office of the Chief Information Officer, OCIO website, Notice of Funding Availability number 7, Iowa Broadband Availability Map V4. There you will have a number of other resources as well for you to dive into and maybe answer any other questions that we might not have gotten to today. So Ashley, if we could jump to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Let me just catch up to you here. So we'll start with eligibility. Who are the recipients that will be making this up? Well, we're talking about private sector carriers, local governments, utilities, and other entities that provide broadband service. Pretty straightforward. What are the service areas, the ESAs? There are census blocks which no provider offers wireline service at speeds greater than or equal to 25.3. Again, the FCC's minimum service broadband speed service. Again, and I felt that's obviously important to reiterate here. Expenditures. Let's close out this slide here on the last piece with expenditures. Expenses related to build out of broadband infrastructure. So what are we looking at for allowable expenditures? Those include directly related to the installation of broadband infrastructure or relating to the build out or acquisition of middle mile service. Keep in mind here, middle mile and Latin backhaul is going to be an important piece here on the wireless side. That is also part of this application. And also, I would note there are more specific budget categories provided by the Office of the Chief Information Officer, the OCIO, as well, and that falls under Category A. Some of those other more specific budget categories are conduit, fiber, copper, design engineering, tower, antenna. So there are a number of other categories as well. You can also check those out. We can provide those as well on the websites under the resources that we provided as well. What is disallowed? Disallowed expenditures, those will include related to land buildings, structures, improvements, or equipment not directly used in the transmission of data via broadband. Also under disallowed expenditures, those also include related to the process of removing existing broadband infrastructure, fixtures or other real property in preparation of the installation of new broadband infrastructure, as well as, in the last bullet, indirect labor costs or administrative overhead. Ashley, if you could take us to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So let's now take a look at the period of performance. Again, this is stated in the NOFA clearly, but it's obviously, most of this is it's extremely important and worth repeating here. Projects must be completed by September 30th, 2026. Projects that facilitate 120 broadband speeds must be, and I repeat, must be scalable to 100/100 within 3 years of project completion. Please keep that in mind. Jumping down to funding request. Applicants may request up to 60% of total project costs. Up to 50% of awarded funds may be accessed upfront, and the remaining 50% will be reimbursed upon project completion. We've included a timeline for you to review application acceptance the application acceptance window, the application review period, the decision award process as well, and finally the grant agreement and execution. So there's a lot there at the tail end that will be done at the state level to identify the award process as well as the final grants in the build out there. So Ashley, if we could jump to the fourth and final slide. Thank you. This will wrap up here with the scoring methodology. Please note the scoring of these 8 categories is out of 100. So again, the score is based out of 100. We'll start with rurality. Projects will be graded on their rurality. More rural equals more points, quite simple. The number of broadband units and projects in a square mile is what they're looking at here. This is weighted the most heavily out of all of the categories, and it's coming in at 60 points. Again, rurality is the highest scoring methodology here on this category chart. Next is completeness. Projects will be graded on the number of units facilitated within an ESA. Total broadband units facilitated, total broadband units within an ESA, again, is how they're looking at this. That score is 10.43. Next is the total broadband units facilitated. Projects will be graded on how many units will be facilitated. Quite simple. That number is at 8.7. Next up is efficiency. Pretty simple. Unit facilitation per dollar spent. So how efficient are you with the dollars is what they're basically looking at. That scores in at 6.96. Next are speeds, relative speeds. Projects will be graded on speeds provided to units. That number is 5.22. Finalizing the last couple here, product attributes. Projects will be graded on factors including service availability, latency, performance, credits, and data caps. That score is 3.48. Next is funds requested. Projects will be graded on a percent project's cost requested for support. Again, projects will be graded on percentage project cost requested on support. That scoring point comes in at 3.48. And then the last piece, the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, areas of emphasis. Project will be graded on their compliance with the Department of Treasury areas of an emphasis, including delivery, platform, applicant business, structure, and affordability. That score is 1.73. So I've concluded my piece here on the funding piece itself. Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you and then over to my colleague, Jamie Fink.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that portion of the presentation. Jamie, why don't you take us through the company and our product portfolio?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Chris. That was excellent. So we're gonna try to make sure that this isn't too much of a company pitch, so to speak. But we've been helping a lot of different ISPs in a number of states, and we've been quite successful in guiding the selection process and in optimizing our solutions for scoring. So I'm going to really try to focus more on the kinds of things that we know that states are prioritizing. Obviously, every state's a little different. So we're really obviously trying to tune this towards the Iowa solutions. Ashley, if you could jump into the next slide, please. So, just very quickly on Airspan, just so you know our resume, so to speak. Airspan's really been growing incredibly well. As of now, we're now the 4th largest LTE provider in the world. And we've had, so that's been great because while we started with a lot of smaller ISPs, we've also grown up to support a lot of large carriers. So we have a really well-established support system for both large and small. And we have really focused a lot on a lot of broadband applications as well in the mobile side. So we're going to talk to you about a mix of today 4G and 5G solutions. And the reason why that's critically important is when we look at rurality and we look at distances, we need to think about how are we going to achieve distances and coverage in these areas if we're looking at wireless solutions. A lot of the solutions are somewhat biased in some ways towards fiber technology in people's minds, but if you look at the scoring, if you can achieve the speeds with wireless, you can absolutely beat out in efficiency in almost every other category if you have technologies that can cover the rural area. So that kind of critical coverage and rurality are the key points that you can address with wireless technology that fiber could take years or not be efficient enough to satisfy enough units, so to speak, that it would cost to dig fiber in areas that may be very difficult to reach rural customers. So we're gonna touch on a number of those technologies, both with the lower frequencies to get long distance propagation through foliage and things like that, as well as our higher performance point-to-point and point-to-multipoint. So Chris pointed out that mid-mile and backhaul is critical to be able to reach sites that may be far away that you need to gain access to consumer homes in these residential and rural areas. So we're going to touch on both that as well as unlicensed point-to-multipoint, where we're really at a great inflection point and timing of all of this because we're moving into the gigabit era where we truly can compete with gigabit solutions over fixed wireless that only previously fiber could do, and that's now a reality. We are an American-based company based in Boca Raton, Florida, about 850 employees globally. I'm based out on the West Coast with the fixed wireless team. So I've been on board for 10 years working on these solutions, and we've actually deployed now in about 7,000 service providers across 170 countries. So we've got a lot of experience with this in the rural areas, and we have a lot of experience making sure that you get the carrier class products and support that you need. Next slide, please. I'm going to touch quickly on these the cellular-based solutions, and again, I think the key important factor for these kinds of solutions versus traditional fixed wireless and rural is that with the FCC opening up more and more of band 41, the 2.5 gigahertz bands, as well as, of course, CBRS, those are really ISP-friendly bands, depending on the area and your availability of getting those licenses, that help us get a lot longer distance and coverage. Now, there's a lot less spectrum, of course, in the cellular bands, and in CBRS, they may be, for example, 10 megahertz channels, which are going to reduce the total capacity. But that's important to note because you don't need to deliver, the gigabit speeds or anything like that to everybody. What you want to reserve this technology for is the customers that are at the longest reach in the worst parts of rurality, or people that are behind trees, because these frequencies are great at delivering that. So today it's very easy to deliver 50 megabit and in certain cases 100 megabit services over mobile, but we might want to reserve this for people that might be harder to reach. And then we'll touch on what we can do at higher speeds for the folks that do have line of sight or in longer distances that we want to be able to hit with customers that we'd like to provide higher speeds where we can. And what we call this kind of a layer cake solution. We want to start with some of the cellular technology where we have need for longer propagation and coverage, and then we want to provide capacity wherever we can when a customer is more visible to a tower location, for example. So in our portfolio, we have a mix of sizes and distances that, of course, that we can support. So this goes from traditional tower macro style in a more of a compact housing, as well as our hallmark. What we're most known for, of course, has been our small cell technology, who we've been selling to some of the largest carriers in the world and are the leading small cell provider at this point. And then also, we have also introduced a variety for those of you that have strand mount solutions and may have access to cable plant. We also have strand-based mobile solutions, which are great because they're very convenient to install on the middle of a cable strand, so to speak. So there are fiber and DOCSIS variations of those as well. So very flexible portfolio based on distance and all the bands that you would need to support. And most importantly, 4G and also 5G now coming our way. So Airspan is very, very aggressive in the Open RAN 5G direction. We are building our own technologies there. So again, you know, US-based company working on all of these technologies. We're the only US-based, you know, cellular carrier customer that our customers can look towards that has the pedigree to do this kind of stuff at this point. Next slide, let's talk a little bit about the fixed wireless solutions. So as a whole, if you look at kinds of things we can do with our unlicensed fixed wireless and some of our microwave technologies, this is really all about delivering bandwidth, high amounts of bandwidth rapidly to locations that are hard to reach. So when we are dealing with rural areas, the reason most of these areas have not been built out yet is likely because there's not fiber in those areas or towers that necessarily have fiber either. So you're in a situation oftentimes where we need to rapidly deploy capacity into an area anywhere from a mile away out to 30, 40 miles away potentially. And in those scenarios, wireless is a great solution to be able to do that rapidly. Today, we'll talk about some different speeds that we can achieve with this mid-mile and backhaul, but safe to say we already do 1.5 gigabit backhauls, and we've been doing that for years. And we also are on the cusp of 3.5 gigabit speeds coming soon with some of these technologies. So as Chris said, you know, you're going to be maturing some of those speeds over the next couple of years. You're going to get to 100 on 100 by the end of the timeline in 3 years. It's important to be able to have the capacity to be able to handle some of those solutions, and our backhaul solutions absolutely can do that. Now, on the point to multipoint front, obviously this is a base station talking to many CPE, many clients in your network. And we've been doing this for quite some time and delivering today, in many cases, 250 megabits down, 100 megabits up. So this is ready already for your 100 needs. You would easily be able to achieve these in the 5 gigahertz and coming soon our 6 gigahertz spectrum that we'll talk about in a moment. And this is great because it allows us to be able to at a cost-effective, no spectrum cost approach, and using more off-the-shelf technologies, which we have all of the intellectual property, source control, et cetera, over. We're taking advantage of commercialized chip technology from the Wi-Fi industry, but making it work in a carrier-grade fashion. And that's important because as we speak now, the FCC is in the process of opening the new 6 gigahertz band. The 6 gigahertz band is going to be the gigabit band, as I like to call it, because we're going to be able to deliver larger channels and gigabit speeds to customers. That's going to be really attractive in scoring to the Iowa State folks as they look at this and say, okay, from an efficiency perspective, cost per unit and rurality, you can reach all these areas, but you also can deliver fiber speeds. That's really interesting because it's not going to take years and high efficiency cost, or low efficiency cost, I should say. So I think the point to multipoint technologies right now are more interesting than ever to look at. It's evolved greatly since many of you may have tried some of the technology in the early days. We're already meeting all the requirements, even with our current technology, but the new technology that comes out in the beginning of 2022 and the band is opening up in mid-2022 with the FCC, we'll be able to deploy now and start to add on those other speeds within the next 6 to 9 months, which I think is a great achievement. And it's really going to keep these proposals for you looking a lot more attractive. So you'll be able to rapidly deploy the speeds out to your customer base, and I think look much more efficient and much more rural than you would be able to do over a much longer timeline with the fiber technologies, of course. So next slides, please. Ashley, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I touched on this briefly, but we wanted to reiterate probably the most useful tool in the toolbox for many of the ISPs that we deal with. And like I mentioned, you're going to be dealing with a lot of locations that are needed to serve areas that fiber already is not in place, even at towers or new tower sites that may need to be built. And that is best achieved with point-to-point wireless technology. It's extremely affordable and is very flexible in distance. And especially when you're in rural areas, there's very little to no noise that you're going to be encountering. So you don't have to worry about expensive microwave solutions. You can take advantage of some of these underutilized, unlicensed bands. This is technology we've been working on for years. Even some of our largest carriers in the world on the mobile side are using us as their reliable backhaul solution for using unlicensed technology. And that's been an incredible achievement for us to be able to take this really cost-effective, high-speed, disruptive technology and even put it into the backhaul of mobile networks. And I think that's a testament to the carrier-grade mentality that we now are able to achieve with this technology, to be able to put that into mobile and also, you know, feeding other broadband networks with these speeds. So as you can see, the distances that we're dealing with here are up to 30+ miles. We have links in places of 50, 60 miles in some cases where we need to, down to across the street. Sometimes you just need to get across a parking lot and that solves the problem. And to be able to do that at, you know, under a couple $100 for 700 megabits as an example, that's pretty incredible to be able to do that today and not have to worry about doing a fiber build. So sometimes you just need to pick the best solution that gets you there. And most of these speeds are well above what the FCC and the Iowa folks are going to look at when it comes down to different speed tiers, you know, being 25.3 and eventually up to 100 and beyond. And you're going to be able to achieve the and beyond category with this as a result of that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the pause button because I know we want to take in a lot of questions here, but hopefully we've been able to give you a bit of a broad education of some of the key components to what's necessary to deploy based on the kinds of guidelines and scoring system that the Iowa State folks have put out there. And we're happy to answer any questions at this point. And I'll turn it over to Ashley if there's any other housekeeping before we get started.
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie, for that. Like Jamie said, we're going to be opening this up for Q&A. You can actually go ahead and unmute yourself to ask questions, or you can just type it in the Q&A box in chat, and we'll get to those. Chris, Jamie, are you guys ready? All right, first question. Why are wireless solutions preferred versus fiber?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that from a pure speed and technology. I would say broadly that people say, a lot of politicians especially think, oh, fiber is the only answer, it's future proofed. But that's a very old mentality even from years ago in my view. But obviously it's not really a preference as much as can I get it there lower cost and can I achieve similar speeds? And the answer to that is yes, you can. Therefore, when you're looking at the scoring metrics and also the ability to get out to rural areas, it makes a lot of sense. You will find there is a mentality though that people think that fiber is the only answer in a lot of state institutions and even with the federal government. But they're starting to learn that, as we saw with things like the Connect America Fund, et cetera, a lot of that money went into fixed wireless because it was proposed as the most efficient and the most rural solution. So I think there's good, strong evidence that that is the most accepted efficiency solution when it comes down to that. Chris?
Great points, Jamie, all around. And there is a timeliness piece to this, as there is with every grant that we see, whether it's a state grant or a federal grant coming out of Congress. So something to keep in mind, and obviously we can turn this around much quicker than fiber. I would also point out on the NOFA itself, there is a wireless project design worksheet, which requires the applicant, and I'm just putting this out there, that proposes, the applicant must propose a wireless project to provide additional information concerning the project design with the special emphasis on backhaul here. So the backhaul design is really what they were looking for. If you're leaning in that direction, obviously the wireless side, and then the office, the internal office will be reading through that. But in any case, again, I just wanted to point out that there is a project design worksheet that will be asked of you should you go down the wireless route, which again, I think for all the points Jamie raised, but also the timeliness and cost efficiency as well on our end. Ashley.
Thank you, guys. Next question. What qualifies for 50% upfront funding? I think that was on your second or third slide there, Chris.
Let me dig that up here. My second slide.
You can bring it up as well.
Thank you. I don't have it all memorized, folks. I apologize. So what we're looking at here, and again, as Jamie pointed out, and I've raised rurality, say that 10 times, is the biggest piece here. And then what we're also looking at here, completeness, as well as relative speed. So again, you need to hit those benchmarks. You could start with 100 to 20, and then obviously you have to meet the 100. And then again, the coronavirus state, local fiscal recovery funds, you need to keep in mind what that is, that section and those requirements in there. And again, that's not weighted very heavily, but something to point out for you. So again, the numbers are, the point totals and the margins are a little funky, obviously, ranging from really 1 point all the way up to 60. But again, I think if you're taking a look at the eligible service area, and if you are in there as an operator, you know, this is really where you're hitting, and then keeping in mind the schools and businesses and homes. And again, one more point, right? The definition. One or more households or businesses that are not currently served by wireline that don't meet the FCC's 25.3 standard. So I think we fall back on the 25.3 standard as well. So
one other point I'd add there is that, you know, when the funding's coming in at 50% upfront, the people that are dealing with putting out fiber need all of that money up front, and they're not getting it necessarily. They're only getting 50%. So you're floating a lot of the cost for a long time if you're talking about a fiber build out to get to the 100% complete. And that becomes a challenge, I think, financially for some, where wireless, you know, you're probably dealing with under 6 months from start to finish in many cases, if you're, you know, depending on the size of your area. So I would say financially as well, there's a big advantage to the speed at which from the day you get the money to the day that you get the next 50% is completely compressed.
Thank you, guys. Can anyone who received funding from the 6th application that they got approved and apply for this funding opportunity?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on what you applied for under NOFA 6. So was it fiber? Was it wireless already? Are you in the eligible service area as well? I think there's a number of considerations in there going forward. And again, obviously, to everybody here, November 22nd is the application due date. So we are brushing up on that rather quickly. But yes, there are folks out there and operators who have participated in previous NOFOs in Iowa that they've proposed. I know obviously NOFO 6 was over the summer. So if you are participating in these, I think that's great. But you know, each one is slightly different in one way. So I think you have to just take into consideration, if you're looking at wireless, great. Did you do that before in the past? If so, what was the area? What was the asking price? Or, you know, what were you requesting in funds, and how did that look?
Awesome. Next question. What sort of support is Airspan offering with the application process?
Another good question. We have a background in doing these grants as a co-applicant, whether it's on the federal side through NTIA or on the state side So we can help with the pulling to actual together the physical application itself, and working through that in a coordinated manner and collaborating with you. Obviously, we are the sub applicant on this, but again, we do have some internal expertise on navigating this. And as well, I think if we're looking at a potential project in the eligible service area, we can talk helping financially as well, and depending on what that looks like. So I can't just, throw something out there until we actually have a sense of, where we're looking at and what the network architecture might look like and be needed as well. So, but yes, we can help on two fronts potentially, for sure.
That's great, Chris. And I hope you guys do take advantage of that. I put the last slide back on here again with our contact email address. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or how we can support you. Anyone who wants to go off of mute and ask questions, I have one last one in the queue here, but if you want to go off of mute and ask your question, please feel free to. I'll give you a few seconds to find the unmute button. All right. Last question that I have here, guys. Where do we go to apply?
So again, all the resources would be under the Office of the Chief Information Officer, OCIO website. There you can find the notice of funding availability, as well as if you want to reach out to me offline, I will send it to you. Ashley can. We have all of the resources as well, but again, as I pointed out in the slide, if you want to go and do some navigating on your own and investigating, Office of the Chief Information Officer, OCIO website, as well as the notice of funding availability number 007. That's what they're currently on. And then the Iowa Broadband Availability Map, that's V4, will have all of the eligible service areas for you as well, but we can provide some of that as well if need be.
Yes, and I will be sending a follow-up email to you guys with details on, the web link and some other resources that would be very helpful to you. And that website again is ocio.iowa.gov if you want to go there to check out some of the tools that are already provided by the state. All right. And that is the last question that I have here. Last chance to unmute yourself if you have any other questions. With that, Chris, Jamie, do you have any final remarks before we close out?
I just want to say thank you to my colleague, Jamie, did a great job, and to all of you out there. Hopefully this was informative. We look forward to doing more of these in the future, and please join us, and thank you, and keep peppering us with questions, even offline as well. We're happy to help however need be, even in this application process, whether it be with the application again itself, or the network architecture in the talking about discussing funding as well in the future. So happy to do all of the above here for you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I much appreciate your joining.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.